Well, we really we kind of went off the deep end.
Sorry.
On Ukraine and all these side topics. I'm gonna reel it back in a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
We were in the no, it's all good. We just had a great conversation about all that. But I believe where we left off was in the middle of your trial, the moment you had realized.
First hearing.
Yes, the first hearing, things started going bad. That trial played out, and I was reading that your trial was like a complete mess. I mean, it seems like there was a situation where there was like an appeal where you represented yourself at one point. How did the trial kind of play out?
Okay, so I had two cases. 0024 RSWL.
Yeah, you sent me two separate case documents.
Is a first indictment, and then the second indictment was 00852 CAS was the second indictment. So I went to trial on the first one and got sentenced to 30 years.
Yep.
6-week trial. And what happened in there is these guys lied. They tried, besides what I did do, they tried to say I did so much that I would never come home.
Yeah.
You know, the legend
they were trying
is
to put you up for life.
The legend is always bigger than the truth, bro.
Yes.
You know, there's government says street value of this, and I'm always like, oh, what fucking street is that? I've never seen that street before, right? Yeah. Like they always add to it. They always enhance it. They always put extras on it. And that's what these informants did. Monir Deary and John Ibrahim, Mark Bellin, they all fucking lied because they didn't want us to ever come home. In fact, the government had promised them that we were never going to come home. And so they put all this shit on it. But again, I was television educated, so I wasn't on the phone. I never got caught with dope, and I never got caught with money. But that doesn't change the fact that they have all these witnesses who, by the time they get to trial, have ironed out the discrepancies in their testimony. And what's really interesting is you get their 302 government reports of their interviews, their debriefings with these guys, right? And you can see their stories don't line up at first. And there's huge discrepancies. And then you get to trial and they all line up. But you know what you're not allowed to do?
What?
That's not evidence. You can't use that to impeach them.
Interesting.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
Yeah, why though?
Yeah,
like, why
you
not?
can say it. You can say, hey, didn't you say this? I don't recall. Hey, didn't you say that? And that was the other thing I noticed, that like the jury did not fucking notice. Whenever the government was asking the informant a question, they start answering before the question's even done being spoken, right? And it's fluid and it sounds great, very articulate.
Scripted.
Everything, yeah. But then when my lawyers ask a question, these motherfuckers can't remember anything.
Yep.
Wait, you have a crystal clear fucking memory.
They've clearly been coached to answer in a certain way for a certain side.
And some of it was transactions that never fucking happened. Like, but it's perfect. The synchronicity of the lie is perfect. And you find out, this was interesting. I used to, when informants used to come into the floor at MDC, they used to get run off. But after I'd been there a while and guys knew who I was, and I had a big case. I was the dude who really did $1 million dope deals, me and Tamer. So there was a certain level of respect because that's what most guys in prison hope to be at some point.
They were like, damn.
Most of them are drug cases, and they always wanted to do the $1 million dope deal. It's kind of like always wanted to actually bang a Playboy playmate. Always, like these little things, right? And
you watch Scarface, you're like, that looks pretty cool.
Yeah, and so when
Until
they
he
saw,
dies.
yeah, so when they saw us, it was like even that we were busted, and even that some of them talked shit. There was a lot of respect from them because hey, we weren't the dudes who were on the yard lying about it. You can look up our case; it really happened. So we had a lot of that. And why did I give that background? I just lost my train of thought.
For what?
What were we talking about just before that?
We were discussing your case and how at trial people were testifying under oath saying, talking about transactions that never happened.
Yeah. Talking about transactions that never happened. And we had that go on like always, right? Like later on I'd get to yards and people would claim that they were on my case. People would tell me my co-defendant's there, right? Yep. Like it wasn't my co-defendant.
Yep.
Right?
So you were kind of like the legend of the yard per se. Like everyone was like, oh yeah, I'm locked up with this guy, and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, to a degree. So after I remember why.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had a certain level of respect, and I had some friends there, and at this point, and I've been in about a year when I started representing myself. I already got, 30 years for the first case, sentenced. And now I'm representing myself, and it's the second case, the CCE, where they're extraditing Tamer. And so now, when we knew there was a rat that would come on the floor, I would get like one of my black friends or Mexican friend to like fucking press them the day commissary came, right? I'd have the whites.
Okay.
If there's a white dude, the whites not do anything to him. I'd be, look, I need this dude on the floor for a couple weeks, and then you can send him. Because white boys, if it's a rat, it's got to be hard candy. You got to get, they don't let you do one hitter quitter or lock in a sock. It's got to be a steel fucking puncture piece, and you got to go for, it's one of the things that the whites are pretty diligent about, man. The NLR dudes and Aryan Brotherhood dudes, if there's a hit and you get called up for it, it's got to be steel, and you got to go for a kill shot. Otherwise, they're going to come get you.
That's heavy,
afterward.
dude. That's serious.
Yeah, that's born of being a minority usually, so they're typically more vicious when they do shit. The Mexicans usually run everything, at least in most of the joints I was in, and they're very organized.
Yep. Very
Very organized to a military degree. And the blacks are the least organized and the least vicious, but they're the biggest headache in any kind of one-on-one thing. I mean, on a one-on-one basis, these dudes know how to fight, man.
Yep.
They're athletic. They have wind. Nobody wants to see them head up either. So everybody has their kind of advantage, right?
Yep.
So I'd get a white dude who I know's a rat. I'd befriend him. He'd order, wait till commissary's ordered the first time, right? As soon as he picks up his commissary, I'd have, either a black or Mexican dude run up in there and fucking steal half his shit, and then I'd come in and save him.
Nice.
Right?
So you're the hero.
Get back some of his stuff. And then I'd be talking to him, right? And this is where I learned this. This is what the government does when they need an informant. People go in there and they say, hey, I want a rat. They tell about their two-penny granny. Even Bill Linehan told me once, he was like, yeah, fuck. When these dudes rat, we have to fucking end. They never stop. They run, they run out of truth, and then they start bullshitting. If we'll sit there till 3 a.m, they'll keep going. This is a DEA agent was fucking, when he was walking me back after my resentencing and everything that day, and shook my hand and everything, he was laughing about it. He's like, yeah, these motherfuckers never stop talking. So what they do is this dude wants to rat, and he gives them a story. They get a queen for a day agreement, right? They call it, and they go and they fucking say blah, 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 blah. And the feds, if they think they can use that guy, they'll tell his lawyer, hey, that's not what we understand. What we understand is it was person D in a green sweatshirt at 3 p.m. on a Thursday doing XYZ, right? And they'll leave that debriefing of somebody else who told them all that with the lawyer. And they'll ask, and they'll tell the lawyer, this is what we're interested in. Can you ask your client if he knows anything about this? And of course, the next day the client remembers everything because you just gave him the info.
Yeah, they've
and
been
that's
coached.
that's what they fucking do. And I found this out by befriending rats for a couple weeks. And I'd act like their friend, right, before they got run off.
Yep.
And I'd act like their Captain Save-A-Ho. And I'd act like, oh, man, I'm thinking about ratting. Can you tell me what's going on? This, that, the other thing. Hey, when they go, I'd always, after they went to a debrief, I'd get them, hey, how did that work? Did they coach you this, that, the other thing? Did they tell you what to say? How's it? Oh, my lawyer told me what they were looking for. Okay, then, then they fucking send him off. Dude's going to fucking get beat down, put a hole in him, go to the shoe, right? A piece of shit. So anyway, that's how I found out. And then I started hiring, there was a former federal prosecutor, this guy, Steve Roseanne, out of Texas. Fucking great guy. He was a federal prosecutor. They went against him, right? They charged him. He ended up winning, but then he switched sides and became a criminal attorney.
Okay.
So he'd come in all the time to see other people, but me and him kind of made a little friendship, right? Like he was trying to be my lawyer when he saw, once people heard I was representing myself, every lawyer in the world thought it was just, I was going to hire another lawyer. There wasn't a money problem. It wasn't this or that, or it just, they thought that this was their opportunity, blood in the water to come. Anyway, me and Steve Roseanne ended up with a few clients in the building, and we ended up being, friends for what it was. So when he would come in, he'd call me down, and I didn't mind to go down, kick the shit with him, and we would talk about this kind of shit. And the other thing I learned is that most federal judges, fortunately not mine, but many federal, I shouldn't say most. I didn't experience this to any great degree with my judges, but a very common thing, and I used to talk to clerks. I used to pay them $500 to come visit me because I wanted info from all these people, right? And one of the common things with federal judges and state judges, I heard from attorneys who I've talked to about this, and clerks, is when they have a hearing, they do not ask their clerks, find me what the right answer to this is, the case law. They say, I want to deny this or I want to grant this. Find me the case law to do it.
So they just want the reason. They say,
So
you're going to make sure this is legit. I have a good reason to do it.
Well, what you find out, and every judge, prosecutor, and lawyer knows this, is that there's case law on both sides.
100%.
They can do it. The whole stare decisis system is the biggest intellectual fucking dishonesty gymnastics ever in history. And it starts with the Supreme Court saying, ignorance of the law is not a defense. But I always said, show me one judge that's memorized fucking 400 books worth of law and regulation.
They can't.
They can't.
They can't.
So, again, a hypocrisy, right? So how are they going to say the same thing to you?
Yeah, they can't expect that of you.
It's fucking all bullshit. It's for appearances. And that's really how I ended up winning, because I realized that. And I got this paper called the Daily Journal. It was the local legal paper. I'm one of those people who just wants information. I don't know if it's valuable or not but I've figured out over the course of my life, the more information I possess, the more information that's in my Rolodex, the more pieces that I have. When something else comes up, those things come in handy. It's kind of like, I guess, kind of like hoarders never throw anything away because the one day they're going to need something, it's still there. But I do that for my brain. I like to feed it as much,
Store it all in there.
as much info as possible. And part of that, what came in that was the daily appellate reports.
Okay.
All the appellate cases for the federal circuit, Supreme Court, and even state court, California. Not the rest of the states, but California. And so I was reading that, and what struck me really a lot was I didn't learn how to be a lawyer. I learned what won on appeal. And it wasn't the law, because they're always doing gymnastics to distinguish between this and that.
There's a law to counter your law, and you got a law to counter their law.
And how do you pull this paragraph out of here, and how do you shepherdize this or that? And by design, I believe, because they lose, I would say 98% of the American people don't have the requisite knowledge to understand it. And I would say out of that 98%, 95 of them do not have the IQ required to understand it. So it's, obscurity is their thing, right? Actually, that's probably not a good word for it, but you get the idea. And they hide that with so much information that most people are just lost with it, and they have to rely on lawyers.
Confusing to most.
But it's all fucking bullshit, right? It's all bullshit. There was a 10th Circuit case. Bribery is outlawed, is a constitutional crime, along with treason, right, and counterfeit. Those are the three constitutional crimes. 10th Circuit case, they said, okay, plea agreements are bribery. They're unconstitutional. You know what the Supreme Court did? Sandra Day O'Connor, liberal. She said, yeah, that's true, but it's so ingrained in our system that it'll cause chaos, so fuck it, we're stuck with it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They just acknowledge, they shouldn't exist, but fuck it.
Yeah.
Too late.
So once you realize that, I was like, okay, cool. So what you have to do is you have to be able to embarrass them. If it's going to embarrass them, you're going to get off.
Yes.
You're going to win your appeal. And that's what I understood by the time I started representing myself in the second case. And that was the appeal that me and Chuck Sevilla, my appeal attorney on the first case, he's amazing. He's the only lawyer that ever listened to me. You're their client, you're paying them, or your family's paying them, or whatever, but they don't listen to you. They treat you as
they know better.
Yeah, they assume they know better. They think they're smarter, and I guess many times they probably are.
For sure.
But when you have somebody who wants to drive the car, you have to fucking get in the passenger seat if you're the hired help, You're the hired help. That's the
100%.
order of operations. And Chuck Sevilla is the only one who listened to me, and the advice he gave me, we didn't agree on everything, but everything, most of the times I listened to him because he took the time to explain to me why what I thought was correct, but why this would be a better approach with evidence to back that up instead of just, trust me, bro. That's the best one. Trust me, bro. I know this. I've been doing this my whole life. I know what I'm doing.
So it sounds like, you had like a real kind of pain in the ass appeal process. Luckily, you had a couple people that were on your team, and made it easier for you. So that initial sentence of 30 years, upon appeal, what did you get that revised to?
Well, so remember, I'm appealing that, but I'm
Yes.
fighting the second case, the CC, Continuing Criminal Enterprise Kingpin.
Oh, God.
The 00852 case where I'm looking at life. This is where I'm
We
representing
got papers
myself.
for all this, by the way.
Yeah.
Read along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where I'm representing myself. And so while that's happening, we're having hearings and I'm putting the smash down, the appeal's going on. Well, it just so happened that we got the wiretaps from the second case. And this is, actually, I got to get you my first sentencing transcript. I'm going to send that to you too so you can put this up because this was the key. Everybody was wrong. At my first sentencing, I wanted to represent myself already. The judge wouldn't let me, but during Rule 35A, B, and C, motion for new trial based on new evidence, I brought the government's wiretap because I was already, I was getting discovery from the second case, which had the wiretap. And I'd found it a couple days before, and it showed 3 lies I'd found. And they were really pretty stupid, but it showed that the government witnesses were lying on direct examination. Louis Palazzo, another fucking piece of shit attorney, just like David Chesnoff, right? Tamer's attorney, both fucking garbage. They have reputations, I don't know why. They're both fucking complete shit. Don't ever use them. Although, credit where credit's due, Chesnoff's pretty connected in Vegas. So, I mean, if you have a Vegas case, I'd probably go with that.
That's the one exception.
Yeah. I give credit where credit's due, even though I completely dislike this motherfucker. And I could go on for an hour about what a piece of shit lawyer he is. I literally had to fight him also. It wasn't enough to fight the government. I had to fight Tamer's lawyer.
So you're just you're fighting the world at this point.
Yeah, if Tamer's lawyer had gotten his way at any step of the way, me and Tamer would still be in prison right now.
Thank God he didn't, so we can film this instead.
Yeah, exactly. So during sentencing in my first case where I get 30 years, I said, I want to represent, and I tell the judge, I'm like, here's evidence that the witnesses were lying on direct examination, which is a big thing. That's a big thing.
Yeah, that's huge. That'll get a whole case thrown out.
And the judge says, well, I've been doing the straw man shit. I copywrote my name. I don't recognize the corporate United States government entity. I was doing that trying to create a pecuniary money problem with the judge to get a different judge because Judge Lou was a tough judge. Me and him are cool. I wrote him a letter after all this. He wrote me back, and he's fair, but he's tough. He's not fucking around. He's not a let him go. There's a Judge Letts. They call him let him go Letts, right? He's definitely not let him go Letts.
Okay.
Anyway, tough guy. And so I'm doing that. And now I come to him in a regular procedure, and I'm like, hey, I want to talk. I got this evidence. And he's like, okay. And I was like, here's evidence that the government lied on, that the witnesses lied on direct appeal. This is government-generated material. Wiretaps, which they didn't give us as discovery. So you got a Brady violation, you got a Jenks violation, you got a Giglio violation.
Sounds super significant.
Yeah, super significant. And the judge is like, okay. And I'm like, are you saying you're not even gonna look at it? He's like, the record will stand on its own 4 corners. And I said, Your Honor, this is government-generated bait stamp material. And he looks at me and he says, I find it ironic that you've been in this court before telling me that the rule of law doesn't apply to you. Yet you want me to apply the rule of law to the government today. I said the record will stand on its own 4 corners. So I know he's not going to look. I also have read enough appeals to know that 3 little lies that aren't going to rise to the level of material, meaning it would have gotten a different outcome from the jury, is probably not enough. So I threw a Hail Mary. I go, I got hundreds of these here, Your Honor. I had 3. Right?
And all or nothing at this point.
Yeah, so I'm like, I got hundreds of these here. You're saying it. So I said on the record, I'll stand on its own four corners. And he sentenced me to 30 years that day. Well, fast forward a year, I'm representing myself in the second case now.
Yep.
I filed a double jeopardy appeal, which I lost. They brought in this Judge Aldisert, who literally copied and pasted the government's briefs, errors and all. They said they didn't even get the type of watch right. It was like a Rolex watch, not a Cartier, right? And they called it a Cartier watch. They didn't even, like, just totally cut and pasted. They brought this ringer from a different circuit sitting by special designation, Judge Aldisert. Yeah, fuck you, Aldisert. But thanks, because I needed to go back to court to be home today. But that was not what you intended, I know. So anyway, he copies and cuts and pastes literally every mistake, right? And they deny me double jeopardy, so I'm back in the second case where I'm representing myself. And so at the same time, these things kind of happen. This evidentiary hearing with John Radkowski, the head of DEA wiretaps, I fucking smashed him. Bill Linehan smashed him.
Yep.
The judge is asking, for sanctions briefing. And I'm like, yeah. And at the same time, the Ninth Circuit finally comes back on my appeal for the 30 years. And what the argument was, my lawyer was arguing, Chuck was arguing, hey, this material should be in. And the government saying, well, hey, it wasn't in the record. He's got to wait until 2255. Habeas corpus argue it. And then my reply, Chuck's reply was, hey, the government's getting a windfall from lying. It's much harder to win on 2255 than direct appeal. Why should my client suffer that? And why should the government get a windfall? And the Ninth Circuit said, well, actually, we're not even going to get to that. We're not going to rule on that because the judge committed clear error when he didn't look at the material and make a finding.
Nice.
Now, if that judge would have looked at that and said, this doesn't mean shit,
you would have been screwed.
Totally screwed, because you know what it is to overturn a judge's finding means not only that they think it's an error, but the second level to overturn a judicial finding is that they have to say no sane, not just them, not just the panel, but no other sane judge would have done the same thing, could have found the same finding.
It's very tough
Yeah, that
to get
is-
the court to declare a different judge pretty much insane.
Judicial
Yeah.
finding is a very difficult thing
Yes.
to deal with.
It's a firm thing to break.
Yeah, so that worked out. I always tell people, look, you gotta take the steps so that when luck comes, you're prepared to receive it.
Yep.
But to act like there's no luck involved, that would be a fucking lie too.
So, during that appeal process leading up to when you finally, succeeded and actually really kind of got lucky that he never looked through the stuff you presented him, did you finally have some kind of renewed hope, like, wow, I'm really going to get out way sooner?
Oh yeah, I knew, the government offered me 20, 17 and a half, 15 and a half, 15 and a half, no further prosecutions. And I took it, that was no further prosecutions. None of my guys' side of the fence had been busted. This was all Monir Deary, fucking Syrian cocksucker piece of shit rat. I made him a millionaire. I made him a millionaire in cash, right? Muslim dude, but I'm the fucking he's talking about in all his wiretaps. His Arab brothers didn't make him no fucking money. I made him a millionaire, but I'm the
Damn.
this fucking piece of shit motherfucker.
What an asshole.
Yeah.
How are you going to talk about the guy who gets you $1 million that?
Multiple millions in cash. I'm not talking about cars and
I
watches.
talk very fondly of someone who made me $1 million, let alone multiple and cars and watches.
So this motherfucker, but he's back in. He got himself
Yeah.
another case. He ratted a couple more times.
Karma
on other
comes back
people.
around.
And then he tried to rat on this last dude who was a bigger rat than him. So he ended up back in.
He met the ultimate rat.
Yeah, this fucking piece of shit, man. But that story, you could go into the details of the case fucking for 10 episodes. But so we that happened at the same time, and 15 and a half, no further prosecutions. I took it, but they didn't give it to Tamer. And Tamer, fuck man, his whole life's on the line.
Yep.
He was in Vught, held for a year there in Amsterdam while fighting extradition. They brought him here. He lands. It's I've got 30. I'm looking at life. He's my co-defendant for CCE on the life case, right? So he's looking at 40 or 50 years, right? If we go to trial. And he was like, bro, do we have a legit chance here? If you're just banging your head into the wall, kind of let me off the train. But, bro, if we got a legit chance, I'm going to fucking ride with you.
Yeah.
Now, this is coming from a dude who's asking me, who has 30 years and nothing to lose, who also doesn't have the last year of legal learning that I have, and none of the things that I've learned, and doesn't possess all the information that I have, just looking in order to risk his life, just looking for my assurance that we actually have a legitimate 1% chance, that it's not just...
That 1% was more than enough to ride on at that point.
And that's literally, so to me, this is a human being that is, he's my brother. I fucking love him. He's family.
That's a real one right there.
Yeah,
That's a real brotherhood.
and we've both been tested, and now I get my deal. They don't want to give it to Tamer, so I call Tamer's attorney, Chesnoff, and Tamer comes out to the rec deck, tells me they're not giving him the deal. I go out and I tell Tamer's attorney, I call on the phone. The phones are numbered. I say, hey, I'm on this phone number, the 4-digit number at this time, so they can look this up if they don't believe what I'm about to tell you. If they don't give Tamer the same deal, I'm not going to plead guilty next week. Well, they took my deal away. So I'd already withdrawn all these motions that I had pending, and I'm moving my second case over to the first judge, because he's the only one that has jurisdiction, because I'm back on appeal there. You couldn't move the first case to the second judge without the appellate court. The appellate court sent it back to the first judge on the first case. So you can only move this one way, and I didn't want to have two different sentencings, because if one judge didn't agree or something happened, I didn't want to be fighting an appeal, right? Like one sentencing, one C1C lock deal. If the judge agrees, he gets my plea and gets sentenced to the agreed time. No, nothing up, nothing down, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I have to start refiling all these motions, and 3 weeks later, they finally caved, and they gave Tamer the same deal.
Nice.
Now, what's really interesting about that is when Tamer landed, when the feds brought him, extradited him here, he landed at LAX, they offered him 20. He didn't know what to do. A couple days later, he talked to his family, he wanted to take the 20, and they took it off the table. They said, no, fuck you.
Oh.
Right? So they had a chance to get 20. In the end, after all this fighting, they had to give him 15.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That's a huge win.
Yeah, huge win. And then, these fucking dumb fucks, the dumb fucks that they are, that's another podcast, just every mistake that the feds made.
Yep.
They seized $600,000 from Tamer's apartment in one of the condos in one of the seizures. And when they booked it in, one cop wrote 400,000, another cop down the line wrote 200,000. So he had a quorum nobis, which is a very obscure type of filing, right? And they were going to have to give him back that money tax-free plus interest, the cleanest money United States Treasury check. Right? Because they fucked it, and they never actually did the asset forfeiture properly because of that, right? So this Pete Holler, hey Pete, if you're out there, love you, bro. Pete Holler, Canadian, fucking stand-up dude, another fucking stand-up dude, didn't fucking rat, took the 20 on the fucking chin.
What a guy.
Became a fucking really good, really respectable jailhouse lawyer, and for a few $100, had Tamer fucking filed all this paperwork. And you got to remember, Tamer's attorney Chesnoff, this fucking retard, right? Fake attorney. If somebody wants to cooperate, they should cooperate that Chesnoff and Palazzo faked their way through law school. That'll get them some fucking...
Those bastards.
Yeah, their diplomas must be fake. But Chesnoff is sitting there telling Tamer what a waste of time this is, just like he said about me saying they tampered with a wiretap, which we proved, which is how all the evidence came out and we got all this action, right? He says, oh yeah, when they start giving Arabs back their fucking drug money, I'll let you know. So Tamer gets with Pete Holler when we're up at Lompoc, and Holler's like a specialist in this particular thing. And Tamer asked me, and I'm like, dude, fucking sounds good to me. I mean, what Pete showed me and I read about it, I was like, yeah, if this, I mean, I have a very specialized knowledge for what we did. I don't know about quorum nobis and all that.
That's above
stuff.
your pay grade at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you could have learned about it, but here's a dude who's a stand-up dude that we were in MDC with. Now we're in the yard at USB Lompoc with him, and he can get it done, right? Like, so Tamer files it, and fucking 8 years later, he wins, and he comes home a couple years early because they didn't want to cut that check.
Yeah.
Right? So they let him home a couple years early with no fine, no halfway house, no fucking nothing. He was just released.
Just going home.
Yeah, just going home a couple years early. And if it was up to Chesnoff, that would have never happened either.
Fucking Chesnoff.
Yeah, fucking Chesnoff.